Good evening, everybody. Welcome in. It is a beautiful, bright day on April the 10th, 2024, with amazing temperatures of 78 degrees here in Dublin, California. So come on in. I'm so glad to have you here. It is, today is National Library Outreach Day. It's International Day of Pink. We got a pinky here. National Hug Your Dog Day. I thought that was every day was National Hug Your Dog Day. And it's World Baton Twirling Day. That reminds me of the time that I lived in East Texas and I was aspirational in terms of wanting to hit myself with a little metal ball. Just like twirling and twirling and twirling. So yes, we are here as Financial Foundations, raising money smart teens. When I was a teenager, my mother encouraged me to go out and get a savings account. And I had some listening skills, but not completely all of them. So I rush out and I get me a savings account. And for years I had a savings account, but she didn't tell me to put anything in it. It was empty for years. It's those little details that really tear you up there. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce the fabulous John Lanza. He's the chief mammal of Snigger Zoo. John and Snigger Zoo are on a mission to help parents raise money smart kids. John is the author of the Art of Allowance book for parents and the creator of the award-winning Money Mammals movie and picture books for kids. He is a great guy. He is an amazing human being. Please, members, welcome John Lanza. Yay!
Thank you, Veronica. This is a privilege to be here, to follow you, and to be able to be talking to all these awesome members here of Patelco Credit Union. And welcome to Financial Foundations, Raising Money-Wise Teens. It's our new Art of Allowance Academy course presented by Patelco Credit Union. And I'm really excited to share some ideas that I hope you will find useful as you take this kind of money smart journey that we're all on with your kids. And hopefully when you do open up your accounts, you will put money in those accounts or help your kids get money in those savings accounts. That's a good thing. And I appreciate Veronica sharing her stories. I think we all have some crazy money stories that we can share. But before we get really rolling here, I want to introduce Erin Prim, who is our jackalope of all trades here at Snigger Zoo. Take it away, Erin.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for that warm welcome, John and Veronica. And I want to extend that welcome to all of y'all. Welcome to Financial Foundations presented by Patelco. Before we kick things off, I did want to share some tips and tricks to help you guys get the most out of today's course. So first off, we feed off of y'all's energy in the chat. So be sure to post any and all comments and questions there this evening because yours truly will be womaning it. And speaking of questions, I'll do my best to answer yours in real time in the chat. But if I feel that an answer would be beneficial for the entire group to hear, then I'll let you know and share the question during the Q&A session for John to address at the end of tonight's presentation. And last, but certainly not least, I'm getting ahead of myself, I'll be dropping links to the Money Smart resources that John mentions during the presentation in the chat. So be sure to have it open and take a peek. So without further ado, I'll turn it back over to John.
Thank you, Erin. Well, let's start with some quick sharing, just get the energy up in the room. Can you drop in the chat where you're zooming in from, what town you're coming in from? It'd be great to hear. And We will do our absolute best, as Aaron was saying, to address questions throughout, but they may have to wait until after, until we're done. I see we got Nicole from Davis. This is terrific. Thank you. Yes, pop them in there. And of course, we will stay on afterwards to answer as many questions as we can for as long as we can. So let's get this party started. So it feels like I started coaching both. I love this. This is great. Thank you. Thank you for all chiming in here. We got Arizona. This is fantastic. So this feels like I started coaching both my kids in soccer around the time they started to learn to walk. My daughters are the two girls in yellow, and any parent who has been through the soccer thing probably knows the look that my younger daughter on the right has, which is all uniform. It's like all uniform, two hands and a head. I call them my Lanza ladies. And as you can see, they have grown up. And now I want to take you
Hey,
back.
John,
though.
you're not sharing your PowerPoint.
Oh, that's not a good. Okay, let's get that back here. Hold on one second. I apologize for that. Here we go. All right. Are we seeing it now, Aaron?
Yep.
Okay. How embarrassing. Okay, so these are the Lanza ladies. And there you can see my younger daughter with her hands, head, and all uniform. And these are them grown up. And, I want to take you back to when we had only one, the first of the Lanza ladies. And my wife and I knew there was one thing we wanted to do, and that was to raise there were a lot of things, but one of the key things was to raise our kids to be money smart. We live in Southern California. We're in Los Angeles, and I see we have people from Texas, Hawaii, Sacramento. This is awesome. And I saw firsthand out-of-hand spending. I mean, honestly, I was engaged in some out-of-hand spending. And I just saw how friends and family members who didn't live frugally on some level, they always seem to be stressed out about money, however much money they seem to be making. I worked in animation, I worked in entertainment, and I worked on shows like Life with Louie and The Proud Family. So you may know some of those shows, but I immediately thought, what if we could turn money smart learning into fun? What if we could make this fun for kids? There's so much stuff out there that's making spending fun, but what about if we made sharing and saving and spending smart fun? If we get kids excited about something other than spending. And so we created the Money Mammals to get kids excited, and they have their mantra, which is we'll share and save and spend smart too. We have been really fortunate to work with credit unions to really impact hundreds of thousands of kids over the past few decades with our simple message about sharing and saving and spending smart. And in this time of entertaining and educating kids and talking with parents, I realized, wait a second, it's the parents like us that need help. We need the confidence that we can be our kids' guides on the money smart journey. We need a practical plan to give our kids a chance to practice with money. And that's why I wrote this book, The Art of Allowance. And it's really informed so much of what we're doing today and over the past few years. It brings us to this course. I created this course for you because I wish I had a course like it. I mean, the most common thing that parents say when I say, well, I help parents raise money smart kids is that they say, oh gosh, I wish I had something like that when I was a kid. Yeah, so do I. This is a course for parents like us who want to prepare their kids to be money smart and eventually money empowered. What does it mean to be money empowered? Well, there are all different definitions, but mine, and I think this will work for us here today, is money empowerment is the ability to use money as a tool. It's not the destination, it's part of the journey. It's to help make money smart decisions and to be in control of money so that money is not in control of you. So that is money empowerment. Now, I have to give my disclaimer, since we're going to be talking about financial information. Please consult with a financial or investment professional before engaging in any decisions that might affect your own financial well-being or your kids' financial well-being. So now that I've finished the disclaimer, we've completed our legalese, let's have some fun. So the question we're answering today is a really important one. If it's not you who's going to teach your kids money smarts, then who? Their favorite uncle? He might have some good jokes, but money smarts? Their teacher? don't hold your breath. I mean, there is pending legislation here in California where they may make it a requirement for high school students to take money smart learning, financial literacy classes. That's great, but it's one semester and this is a lifelong thing. Friends, yeah, this might be exactly what happens. Friends, social media. And that's why I'm so excited that you're here, because you know that it's you that has this job. That's who's got to do it. And it's my job to help you be your kid's guide. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about the importance of getting started early. We're going to talk about allowance and chores, because that's something that always comes up with parents. And it's just something we need to address. But we're going to spend most of our time talking about growing your program with tweens and teens and tips and techniques that you can use. I wanted this to be as practical as possible, but giving you this kind of why, because we have to start young and foundational, because you just can't build a house that stands without a foundation. But don't worry, you're going to get lots of takeaways for your tweens, teens, and even young adults. Most importantly, please stay with us, because I'm going to reveal the 2 habits that matter above all others later in our talk. So getting started early. You could start as young as 2 or 3. Why? People are like, 2 or 3? What are you going to talk about? Well, you're not going to talk about compound interest. You're not going to talk about the rule of 72, but habits are forming. And kids are going to be asking questions, and you want to open up the conversation. You want to build, this is a good way to think about it, is building good habits now so you don't have to break them later, or so they don't have to break them later. But just like the best time to plant a tree was years ago, the next best time to start a money conversation, planting a tree, is today. So if you haven't started this and your kid's a teen, it's okay. Today is the time to start. That's why we're here. Open up the lifelong conversation. I've joked before that I call it the art of allowance, but it could easily be called the art of money conversation. And I'm here to help you along this journey. So we're going to start with our 3 core money smart skills. They are distinguishing between needs and wants. Now, you probably know about basic needs. Your kids probably know about basic needs if we're fortunate enough. So we kind of came up with this new term that might also be helpful. So we have the basic needs of clothing, food, and shelter, but we came up with this idea of needlets. And these are conditional, smaller needs. They're not necessarily you don't need them to survive, but you need them to thrive. So for example, you can't play soccer without a soccer ball. So if you've got your basic needs met, you can talk about needlets and wants with your kids. Number 2 is setting and saving for goals. I mean, this is just a key life skill, and using money to teach it is a great way. Instead of saving for some abstract rainy day that, any young kid is going to be like, what, rainy day? We encourage them to save for what they want. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Actually, we'll probably talk a lot about that. And then number 3 is making smart money choices. Using money is all about making choices. Save or spend, buy brand name or generic. We want our kids to be mindful of the choices that they are making. And you know what happens in this journey? We become more mindful of the choices that we're making. We become better models for our kids as we go through the process. So let's quickly discuss these starter allowance foundations. So we call it the starter allowance. This will go roughly from age 5 through 9 or 10, and it'll give us the foundation to talk about our next stage of allowance. The purpose of an allowance at whatever age is to give your kids experience with money. And that is because that is how people learn. That is how we all learn. Morgan Housel, who wrote The Psychology of Money, I think it sold 4 million copies by now. It's unbelievable. He said something great. He said, reading or watching something makes you feel like you understand it, but you don't understand it until you've experienced it. This is especially true with money. You can tell people to, hold when the everything seems to be crashing around you, hold on to your investments. But you know what? When that's happening, you might just sell at the absolute worst time. You have to have experience to know how you're going to react or to change or develop the behaviors that will help you react best in times of trouble. So you set up the 3 jars. We got our share, our save, and our spend smart. We call it spend smart so that we are thinking, making smart money choices, getting our kids to think. We give them an allowance every week, $5 a week for a 5-year-old, so $1 per week per age of the child. Great place to start. And here's my suggested starter allowance. Put one of those $5 into the share jar. Why do we do this? We want to kind of nudge them into this idea that charitable giving is a habit we want them to develop. We put $1 into the save jar. This is starting the habit of paying themselves first. And then we put $3 into the spend smart jar. This is to control that habit. That habit that they're going to develop, just spending money. Now, please don't over worry the mistakes that they're going to make on the money smart journey when they get some control of the money, because by making low mistakes now, they can avoid making much bigger mistakes later. And now, rather than reaching into your pocket for each and every whim that they've got about something they want, it's now their responsibility. You want a new pair of sneakers? Great. Save your allowance. What's great about this is that it just eliminates so much conflict, because now once they get it, now in the beginning, there may be a tantrum or two, but just hold strong. It will work out. Then they start doing some chores, and if they want more money, they can save their allowance. They can start doing more chores, get a job. We're going to continue on this point, but this is really, really important. Now, at some point, you'll probably encounter a situation like we did. This is what's great about this whole process, is that some of these things just naturally happen. So like my daughter wanted a scooter. Your kid is going to want something. They're not going to have enough money. So I told her in this case, set a goal with her save jar money. And then that's what she did. So we set a SMART goal. So this SMART goal, now you might be familiar with this acronym. I did not make it up, but a SMART goal is SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Now at each allowance time, you can talk to them about achieving their goal faster by putting more money into the save jar. So what kind of SMART goal did we set? Well, here's what we did. She wanted this. She wanted the item. She pasted a picture of it on her jar. She didn't have enough money. We set that SMART goal. And how is it SMART? Well, it's specific. It's something she wants. It's measurable. How much money does it cost? It's attainable. In the beginning, first goals shouldn't be too big. Like for a 5-year-old waiting 6 months for a goal, they just don't have a concept of time to deal with that. They're going to get frustrated. So the idea of saying a 2 to 4 week goal is perfectly okay, right? Just to delay gratification a little bit. And then we have R, which is relevant, something they want, and then time-based. You put how long it's going to take based on their allowance. And then, of course, at allowance time, they can get there more quickly by putting some of that spend smart money into the save jar. And here she is after getting this scooter that she bought. And it's really just the idea of saving for goals, very powerful tool that we can use with our kids. So now you're part of this Art of Allowance project. So let's dive in. I'm going to be sharing stories from many of my podcast guests. So I have a podcast called the Art of Allowance Podcast, and I invite people on, money experts, parents, and very often both. So in this class that we're doing here, you're getting so much more than just my thoughts on the subject. I've kind of become this money anthropologist. I just spend my time uncovering ideas I can then share with you to help you and your family on the money smart journey. Because there's so many ideas that are out there, and what works great for one family may not work that great for another. And honestly, what works great for one kid may not work for another. You are the one who will figure that out with and using all the different ideas that we talk about here. And me telling you how to do it exactly is not the answer. You discovering how to do it, using the tools that we provide, that is the answer. So the first person I want to introduce is Robin Tobes. So she was in episode 48 of the Art of Allowance podcast. And Robin is a CPA. She comes from money knowledge. I call her my co-conspirator in the Money Smart movement. And she's also an author of a book called The Wisest Investment. And she told me about this woman who taught her son a very valuable lesson. She wanted to encourage her son to reach their goals. And this concept that we're talking about here of matching, which you'll see there on the screen, it can be really helpful if your kid lacks focus or if it's their first attempt at saving. So one way to effectively encourage your kids to a goal is to match their savings. So if they're saving, say, for a $20 toy, you can match their savings of $10, for example, or you might match just $5. But this is a way to incentivize them. And speaking of incentives, on episode 60, I spoke with Tom Henske, who is a financial advisor and now is full-time in a program based on his book called Total Sense. And Tom in his book, each of the chapters is about a conversation that you can have with your kids at the dinner table about money. It's a wonderful setup. But we talked about incentivizing. And so he came on and he said, one of the things he really wanted to do was incentivize his kids to use their share jars, and they matched any contribution, including an allowance time that they made. So this was to help enforce a value that was important to his family, charitable giving. We did something like this too. We wanted to incentivize our kids to read. So we actually told them that we would pay them half of any book that they wanted to buy. And that doubled their purchasing power. We still do that. So think about the things you want to incentivize. And I bet you're all going to have great ideas that, I kind of wish we could all come back together and start sharing those. But it's such a powerful way to get your kids to instill your values in your kids, is using this idea of incentivizing. So now let's talk about chores. So chores are the subject that's really intertwined in people's minds when they think of allowance. And I think I like to start with the purpose of chores, just like we started with the purpose of allowance. So to clarify, the purpose of chores is to teach kids that we often have to work in order to earn money. The purpose of allowance is for kids to learn how to use money as a tool to become money smart and eventually money empowered through their own money experiences. So the purpose of chores is to teach them that work is required to earn money. Now, most parents don't pay for basic chores, like jobs around the house that kids have to do as part of the family, like clearing the table or making your bed. I kind of think of these chores as rent that they contribute. Another way to think about it is we want our kids to contribute to the family without having to be paid for it. And one of the problems with paying kids for basic chores is that when they get to be a teen and they have a job, they can't opt out of clearing the table if it's a family rule. So it gets problematic to start that rule up. Now, of course, teaching your kids that work is required to earn money is a very good lesson. And so you can pay them to do something that you might pay or might do or pay someone else to do separately. So for example, yard work or cleaning the car. So I'd love to know, let's get some feedback here. How do you use chores at home currently for any of you? I'd love to know if people are paying for basic chores, are they doing above and beyond chores? I'd love to just give us a sense if anybody's out there that is using chores and allowance. I'd love to know what you're doing currently. And if you have any questions so far about what we talked about in terms of chores and allowance. And one point I do want to make is that whatever I'm saying here, if you feel, and there are people that feel uncomfortable about it, like I'm trying to make the point that allowance is not a handout if you're purposeful about it. But if you're still uncomfortable with it, it's more important that kids get money into their hands than it is that you decouple chores and allowance, because the experience with money is what really matters here. Okay, so let's see here. We have a base. Thank you, Nicole. That's great. I love that, Nicole. And what's fun, what I want everybody to share, because I want to see all the different ideas, because I find that there are kind of little gold nuggets that each of us have that we can share. And I know we have a very short time here today. I'm going to kind of continue on, but please put stuff in the chat if you have anything to share about what you've learned about chores and allowance here. Yeah, there we have Celine here. Thank you. No allowance. Chores are part of the family and extra work. This is great. Okay, so let's continue. And now that we've kind of covered a few techniques and we've talked about chores, let's talk about how your allowance can grow with your kids. So that starter allowance I explained can continue till they're about 9 or 10. And then you can increase the allowance this is during that time, every year, every 6 months to a year. So an 8-year-old, for example, might get $8 a week. But when you have a tween, you cross this bridge from starter to what we call the flex allowance. Now, in my book, I call this the breakthrough allowance, but I think flex is better because having talked to so many people on my podcast, I just have gotten, I want people to realize there's a lot of flexibility with what you can do with the allowance, understanding that the purpose is to get money in their hands so they start to learn. So let's talk a little bit about how this works. So this is a good time to start this is around 10 to 12 when they're teens. Again, if your child is 14, perfectly fine. You can start it now. You're going to add in some more responsibility. For example, you're going to make them responsible for buying their own clothes. You're going to adjust their allowance appropriately, and you're going to give control to them. And in the lead up to this change, it's a good idea to take a few months to calculate what you're spending on clothes, for example, for your kids. That way you have a sense of what they should be getting per month. But again, it's called the flex allowance because, if you start the allowance and you feel that honestly, like they need a little bit more money for clothes, you can always increase it. If you feel like they're too flush with cash, you can decrease it, right? And you're going to give them increased responsibility. We kind of ripped the Band-Aid off and increased it immediately from just having the starter allowance to clothes, communication, so their phone, paying for the service, food. And the way we did food is that this is not, if we're having dinner together, they're not paying for that. It's food out with friends. And then I read this great strategy in Ron Lieber's The Opposite of Spoiled book, where he said, this family would incentivize their kids to make their own lunches by saying, if you buy school lunch, that will come out of your allowance, but we'll get you the fixins to make your own lunch. And it really worked. Our kids very rarely bought any school food, and they would just bank that money. So they had it for clothes, communication, and gifts. So gifts is the other thing that they were now responsible for. And this just, again, these things, taking the responsibility from you and moving it onto them is just another step. It's kind of like part of a rite of passage that they can go through, and they're not adults. They're kind of adulting. And then we give them their allowance once a month rather than once a week. So it's kind of like a paycheck. We're changing that frequency to model the real world because we're getting them ready for the real world. So people always ask, and we started with an allowance of about $120. Keep in mind, that's for the month. So that ended up being about $30 a week. So it changed, went up from approximately $9 or $10 a week to $30. But look at the difference and the responsibility that they have. It's very important for people to understand the responsibility that goes with the money. And when you give them control of money, you're going to have some, let's say, cringeworthy decisions that your kids are going to make. I remember my daughter bought this $15 like My Colorful Uniform playset. I made up that name, so I'm not going to disparage any company here in the class. But all I could think in my head was, what a pile of junk. But I had committed to letting her be in control of the money. And this is where Joel Saul-Sehy talked about something in episode 69, which is one of our more recent episodes, about this idea that I use with my kids too. So Joe, and this is a great way, instead of labeling things as mistakes or what you perceive to be mistakes, this is a great way to make this a more productive conversation. So Joe is the host of Stacking Benjamins. Many of you may have heard of it. It's an award-winning financial podcast. And so he shared this story of his daughter who bought something at Target. And he's sitting there, he's like, I know she shouldn't be spending the money. But what he did is he marked a date on his calendar 2 weeks later to follow up with her. And he calls this the circle back technique. And in this case, it turned out she agreed with him. She actually, in 2 weeks, she's like, I don't know that I really, that wasn't the best purchase. And using this technique teaches them to be reflective, to think about spending. And now keep in mind, I use this with my daughter, and, what we think is not a great purchase or not great value isn't necessarily what they think. So she wasn't using it, that My Colorful Unicorn set in 2 weeks, but she felt like she got a decent amount of value of it using that in the 1 week she did. So remember, our judgment of something is not necessarily their judgment of something. And this is all about kind of developing that key money smart skill, making smart money choices. And it comes from them making choices and we, as their guides, helping them along, right? Okay, let's see if anybody can remember. We'll do this together. What are the 3 core money smart skills that we talked about earlier in the program? Let's see if we can do this. Pop in one of the money smart skills into the chat. I want to see if everybody is here paying attention, seeing what we talked about. Anybody want to throw out one of those core money smart skills? Come on, let's see it. There we got, okay, beautiful. We've got saving for goals. Perfect. Yes. What's another one? Anybody want to throw out? So we have setting and saving for goals. What else do we have? I'll give you a hint. Distinguishing between, what were they? Yes. Thank you, Stephanie. Distinguishing between needs and wants. And finally, what was it? Making your lunch. I love that. It is making something, but it is making smart money choices, right? So it's distinguishing between needs and wants, setting and saving for goals, and making smart money choices. So thank you. And yes, this is presented by Patelco. Thank you, Veronica. Okay, so those are the core money smart skills, but we're going to build on those. So let's add in some good money habits that you can bring in when they become tweens and teens, building on these core money smart skills. And guess what? We have a video series featuring these habits that you can watch and show to your teen. So along the lines of the making smart money choices are some simple things. Save rather than spend. And then weighing the costs of every purchase. So this is understanding the concept of opportunity costs, which is so key. Money you spend now is money you're not investing that could become worth a lot later, right? So understanding that concept is really, really important. We actually have a good money habits video on SMART goals as well. Then we have don't spend more than you make. Again, sounds so obvious, so hard to do in our consumer-driven culture. And then using money as a tool. Now, these habits are really important. And of course, there are many other areas that your teens are eventually going to have to learn about. There's credit score, insurance, good versus bad debt. But we're not going to cover those here. We just don't have the time. But there's also a reason we're not covering those. And that is we want to stay focused on the behaviors, the habits that really matter, right? And I'm going to tell you a quick story of my grandfather, to whom I dedicated my book. When the day I finished college, he actually came up and he said, all you really need to understand to deal with money is live beneath your means, don't spend more than you make, and understand the power of compound interest. And by that, he means make time your ally, make time your friend. And there's no better time to do that than when you are young, when you're a child. Time is so on your side. Now, these habits are not easy to inculcate in our kids, because less is more, which is what we're kind of saying in some cases here. It really contradicts some core beliefs in our culture that more is better and more choice is always better. And this is where modeling on our part can really be helpful for them. And this is something that if you're taking the Money Smart journey with your kids, we can all be learning. So we all carry, money stories, things we wish we had done better. Veronica shared one. I mean, I talk about in my book. I remember the first time I bought a computer when I moved out here to Los Angeles, and I paid $2,000 for that. It was a $2,000 computer, and I bought it on a credit card. I thought it was so clever. That computer ended up costing me $3,000 once I had paid all the interest off. But I never carried a balance again. And so these are the lessons that you want our kids to learn earlier than later, and in the grand scheme of things, that wasn't a hugely expensive lesson, but taking out a massive student loan with no context of what money smarts is or how money can affect them down the road can be really problematic. That's why we want to have this open conversation and model as many of these behaviors as we can. And if we feel like we're not being the models we want to be, we can change our behaviors as well. So let's talk a little bit more about how you can think about allowance as your teens kind of take on things like a job, for example. I like to think of allowance as a set of sliders. So as the job income increases, allowance can decrease. So if they start to make more money, you can adjust. That's why it's called the flex allowance. You can decrease the allowance. And if that changes, you can increase it back. Don't worry about making changes. And of course, you always want to keep working with them to reduce expenses. And again, modeling can help here. If they see us talking about reducing expenses while we're spending like Kanye West or Miley Cyrus, that's going to be a problem. So we can make adjustments ourselves. I made so many adjustments the way that I look at money based on having gone through this process with my kids. And I actually could tell you, it's really, it's actually an exciting part of this journey is going through it together with them. So regarding income, though, some of my guests have some very interesting perspectives that I think you might find useful. So David Owen is an author who wrote The First National Bank of Dad. Terrific book. This is one of the books that was really influential in me writing my book. And so David, who's a terrific writer, said for his kids, he said school is their job, right? So he didn't require them to work during the school year. Now, he also recognizes he had a certain amount of privilege to be able to do that. And his kids did work in the summers, right? But he felt that school was their job. That's one way of looking at it. Now, James Robert Lay, who I had on the podcast, who's an entrepreneur, he doesn't believe in allowance. He's like, I'm just going to have my kids create businesses, and that's how they're going to make money. Now, his kids were younger. And one of the things that I pushed back on James Robert, I said, you may be missing an opportunity when they're really young in that starter allowance time to give them some experiences with money. And then, once you transition, instead of, you may want to transition to something that's less about an allowance and more about entrepreneurial ventures, but that might be better for tweens and teens. So just a thought, but what I want to show you is that there are different ways that you can look at this and different perspectives. And that's one of the things that the value of the podcast provides is all these different types of perspectives. Now, some of you may be thinking about digital tools, right? And that's a good thing because, your kids are eventually, once they become tweens or teens, are going to want some kind of card, most likely. Doesn't matter so much what you choose because it's really just a tool. They may provide financial literacy material there, but ultimately it's a tool in your toolbox, and you can prepare them for the real world with this debit card and digital money. They need to learn that, right? But don't think that this tool is the thing that's going to teach. It's part of your overall program. And so you can move your physical jars into digital jars. So everything I said about physical jars applies to the digital jars, incentivizing, setting and saving for goals, all those kind of things. You can even start this young. I mean, Chelsea Brennan, who is the smart money mama, she came on the podcast and talked about for her kids who are, I think, 7 and 5, they get a digital allowance at those ages. I personally think that's a little young. She did it because she wanted to make sure that she never missed an allowance. She wanted to be consistent with the automated allowance. Perfectly reasonable. I like the cash because then they can get used to seeing physically how an exchange happens. And it's harder for them to see that obviously with the digital money. So lots of different ways you can think about this. But now let's talk a little bit about making time your ally. So let's talk about the grow jar, investing, growing money over time. I'm sure for anybody here who's got teens, this is something that you're thinking about or are worried about, or your kids have asked you about. And so I want to share 2 ways to get started with investing that came from 2 of my really good podcast guests. One is Will Rainey. So Will is great. He's a young guy, fairly young guy, financially independent. And he actually moved to Southeast Asia with his family so he could really focus on his kids and living with them. And he wrote a book called Grandpa's Fortune Fables. And I see Sucharita right here. Same here. You like the cash too. Thank you for chiming in. I love that. If anybody has any comments they want to put in here, or it's great for everybody to see what people are thinking about with regard to how we're going through this money smart journey. Love it. So he talked about the 3 rules of investing, and he uses the metaphor of a tree. And I like that he keeps it simple. He's like, keep 1 out of every 10 seeds you receive. So that's the idea of saving a portion, say 10% of any of your money. Plant those seeds, make sure to invest them. And then this is so important. Let your trees grow. Be patient. Now, I want to stress, this is hard. It is hard for me at age 55. It's really hard for someone who is 10, 11, 12, 15. Being patient is tough. But talking to our kids and having them understand that patience matters is worth the conversation. Another way to get started in investing is something that Jessica Willis, who is the founder of Pocket Nest, which is a great app for adults to get their financial houses in order. But she came up with this concept of spirited investing. And what she did was during the holidays, now Jessica was a financial planner. And during the holidays, she sat down with her 3 kids and said, I'm going to give you a certain amount of dollars over Christmas. This is going to be your gift. And then she explained, you can invest in stocks and explain what stocks were. You can invest in index funds, explain what those were. And you can invest in ETFs, explain what those were. And they were off and running. And each of them invested in different things. Now, some of you may be saying, well, of course, so she's a financial planner. She knows everything. You could just print out what all those things are and talk to your kids about them, right? This is really introducing them to these concepts. And then if you feel uncomfortable with having these conversations, find a financial planner to talk to your kids, or find someone else in the family that can talk to your kids. But we're not talking about really complex concepts here. We're really just talking about investing in index funds, maybe investing in stocks, right? And frankly, if they wanted to invest in crypto, that can be fine. Just make sure it's only a small portion of what they are investing. And again, remember my disclaimer, not a financial advisor. You want to make sure that you're talking about this with your financial advisor. But this is another great idea from Jessica Willis. And another investing idea came from Bill Dwight from episode 7. This is the Roth IRA and getting our kids investing in a Roth IRA. You can set one up with your kid when they start working and they start earning W-2 income. The Roth is great because it grows tax-free. And when you take it out, you don't pay taxes on it when you take it out. But what I love about what Bill was talking about is the idea of matching. So bringing back this match that we talked about way back with Robin Tobe, you can put that in. He's matching dollar for dollar, but he's matching to incentivize them to put the money in the Roth IRA, right? So it's kind of like he's like the company matching the money that they're putting into their retirement account. And that Roth is terrific. And one of the tools that he has here, I love. So he has a terrific chart that you can use when you start a Roth IRA to help them see where their money can go. Because compound interest is a really tough concept to get across, because understanding the power of time is difficult. But here graphically, you can actually they can see how their money is going to grow. And he actually tracks not only that she tracks how it's doing and then how it can do based on using, I think he's using 7% per year as the rate. And then he helps them track and see how their investments actually did and then where they might go. And so this is a great thing, and we'll have a link to this so you can download that. You can make a copy of this and download it. Great thing to do, particularly if you have a kid who's already started working. Set them up in a Roth IRA, and they will thank you later. Our approach is really just this idea: let them scratch the investing itch in whatever way they can. So if they wanted to invest in something like stocks or say crypto, I'm not even sure if you can call that necessarily an investment, but set up a Mad Money account. That's something that Jason Zweig, who's the intelligent investor of the Wall Street Journal, calls a Mad Money account. So some small percent of what they're going to invest in something like that, just so they could scratch the investing itch. So our daughter wanted to invest in some stocks. She invested in Adidas. I actually just did that in my brokerage account. And then everything else can just go into a low fee index fund. And the reason we do that, or we talk about this, is because Jason Zweig, again, who's the intelligent investor of the Wall Street Journal, said the single most critical factor in future performance of a mutual fund is that small, relatively static number, its fees and expenses. One of the things we want to do is try to keep things as simple as possible for ourselves and for our kids, because we want to be their trusted advisor. So Bobby Rebell, who is a fairly notable kind of money whiz, came on the podcast in episode 53. She has a book called Launching Financial Grownups that talks about teens and young adults. And she had this conversation with her daughter. And this is why we open up a conversation and stay in the conversation, because her daughter said that she had begun saving in a work IRA. And so Bobby's like, well, what fund did you put that in? She said, well, I just put it in the IRA. But if you just put it in an IRA, that's just going into cash. She hadn't put it into any actual investments. Now, if Bobby hadn't talked to her, she would be sitting on cash and not investing that money. So we can be that trusted advisor. We may have to kind of get into make sure that we are being heard, we'll put it that way, so that our kids are making the best possible choices that they can. This is why we engage in these money conversations, to be a part of their thriving as they get older. And again, the best time to start a money conversation is before they start kindergarten. The next best time is today. And I can tell you, now that my kids are 18 and 20, opening up this conversation has made things so much easier. Is it all, rainbows and unicorns? No, it's an up and down journey. But we were able to set our 18-year-old up with her Roth IRA once she started working. And that is just a wonderful, wonderful thing for her to have as she gets older. And to also just be aware of all these things, all these key habits that we're talking about, because they're things that are now kind of part of her being, right? And same for my older daughter. So this is something we want to engage our kids with and make sure that we are being heard and that they are getting experience with money. I had another terrific guest on. Yes, the famous Veronica Dangerfield in episode 61. And the reason I want to talk and give Veronica the final word here is that I asked her this question. I said, Veronica has taught so many students about financial literacy. And I said, what is it that parents don't know that they need to know about kids? And she said, a lot of these choices that kids make seem silly to you, seem like they're mistakes, but they're perfectly normal to them. Some of the stuff that they buy just doesn't seem right because it's not something that you had when you were a kid. It seems like a waste of money. But remember, they're just trying to fit in. And that is, go ahead, Veronica.
Yeah, it's when teens and tweens get together, it is basically group thinking. They all want to impress each other. And there's so many small ways that seem innocuous to us that are very, very important to them. and fitting in with their peer group. And as a parent, having raised three totally different individuals, I tried to be sensitive to it, so that I can respect what their choices are, and also be a great mom mentor, which is kind of contradictory in terms, because, you can tell somebody else's kid anything, but your own are rolling their eyes, right?
Well, I mean, that's so true, Veron. I mean, it's much easier for me to tell everybody this stuff than it is to do it, with my own kids. That is just a natural part of it. And I think, the other thing is we have to just be cognizant of the sheer amount of choices that are available to these kids, and when they're faced with these choices, they may make what appear to be poor choices, or frankly, just be frozen and unable to make choices at all. And this is the reason we want to keep these messages simple and focused. And so I before we, leave you here, I just want to emphasize these two core things: living beneath your means, which is don't spend more than you make, and making time your ally. Honestly, if you don't remember anything else, those are the two things we want our kids to understand. Those are the habits we want them to kind of really internalize. And remember, you're on the money smart journey with them. And I think some of these ideas will help you on that journey to money empowerment, help them on the journey to money empowerment. And yes, the journey can be very bumpy. And while we've made some good progress today, we have literally just scratched the surface. And so I just want to tell you that if you like what I've shared with you tonight, as you can tell, I just love talking about this, and I'd love to have you join me on the journey. So I send this newsletter out called 3 Ideas to Share and Save, and I send it out every Monday. I think it is an invaluable resource for any parent who is serious about raising money smart kids. There's no cost, there's no spamming, just ideas to share and save. And if you sign up tonight, we will send you a list of all the links that are here and all of tonight's resources. And I will pop my email into the chat too, because if you have any questions, please reach out. And I just want to thank Patelco and, of course, Veronica Dangerfield. This was super fun. I look forward to trying to answer some of these questions here. And Veronica, it's your stage again.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to, can you do the next slide? I just wanted to mention that Patelco does have a student checking for young people from the ages of 13 to 17. Of course, there's no fees, there's no monthly minimums. And it's great that they understand what a credit union is, because they have so many choices. They've got those, all of those easy access, and it seems like they're a bank, but they're like the chime accounts. When they go to chime accounts, they have to be perfect and they can't make any mistakes. So when they experience fraud, they have challenges. So introduce your student to come to a credit union for their first bank account, and let us mentor them into the best financial habits available. So that was my little commercial. So you could go back to the other one, the other slide for your questions, Aaron.
All righty. Well, John, I have one question in the queue for you.
Okay.
I figured would be beneficial for everyone. So Victor asked, is there any value to using the word task rather than chore to avoid that immediate negative association that can happen when you're discussing chores?
Yeah, Victor, I think that's a really good idea, because chore does have a little bit of that kind of pejorative sound. It's like, oh, I got to do a chore, but a task. I love that. I think there's no problem at all with that. Go ahead. I love it.
It's very creative.
Yeah, it is very creative. I love this. And and please, if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat. This is a great time to do that. Of course, if you have any questions later, if something occurs to you, I drop my email in the chat, and you can just grab that, email me at any time. I love to discuss this stuff, and I'd love to help you out as you're on this money smart journey with your kids.
Wonderful. Well, Well, since you did such a thorough job, John, we don't have a whole lot of questions, but I wanted to thank all of you for spending your evening with us. You will get a copy, a link for this presentation in your email in 2 to 3 days. Make sure that you share it with anybody else who's having young people, and because raising money smart kids is a really good idea. Because when you raise them money smart, when they grow up and they come back to live with you, they're not asking for money.
I love it.
I wanted to thank everybody for coming tonight. Thank you, John. I just always love having you on. You bring your own crew, which I always appreciate, and you do such a thorough job. Your passion is very evident, and I really, really appreciate you. I also want to thank Andrew, who's behind the scenes, being excellent as usual. Stephanie says thank you. It was very helpful and reassuring. So yeah, so we will see you soon, and thank you so much for coming tonight, and continue. We create what we pay attention to, so focus on raising money smart kids so that you can have money smart adults. Have a great evening. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.